They can hear us now. Hey, everyone. How's it going? We're glad that you've joined us for another Let's Talk episode where we talk about sermon recap or things going on in the week. What are we talking about today?
Well, last week in the sermon we talked about Romans chapter 12, and it's a famous passage. The beginning of it is about being a living sacrifice and not conforming to this world. It's a verse that gets used in a lot of sermons, a lot of my sermons anyway. And then the second part of that passage in the first Romans 12, 1 through 8, was about spiritual gifts. And that was the part that I really didn't have as much time to dig into just because of the constraints of the sermon. But he lists, Paul does, at the end, some motivational gifts that he says that we all have. And I don't think it was meant to be an exhaustive list. I mean, sometimes you might have a gift that's not on there, and that I think has to be expected. I don't think he intended for that list to be the be-all, end-all list of all time. But I think it's instructive, and I think it encompasses a lot of different possibilities. There was a book that I purchased, long time ago. I'm not even sure it's in print now. I still have a copy, 20, 30 years ago, by Don Fortune that talked about spiritual gifts. And I can't recommend the book wholeheartedly, but I've gotten a lot out of it through the years, and it helped me think about how we each fit into these categories. Now, I should mention, just as an exception possibly in the very beginning, gift studies like this, I think, have to be taken with a small grain of salt. And not just this, I think as people, we like to study ourselves and like to meditate on ourselves and think about ourselves and how ourselves might rank. And I think studies that encourage you to test yourself to see where you fit, I think people are attracted to that. And I mentioned that, I think, in a message not too long ago, whether it's the Myers-Briggs, are you an introvert, extrovert, and all those kind of things, or there's a disc profile that tests whether you're dominant or influential, or the Enneagram.
Jeff loves the Enneagram.
See, I don't like the Enneagram. Now, I'm an 8-wing 9.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I'm a 1.
A 1 wing anything? Just a 1.
8 maybe.
Okay. The hard part with that kind of stuff, and what I don't like, and he's teasing me about it, is that people can do that stuff and then they think, oh, you're that. Yeah, I see that now. And there's a temptation to think you can figure someone out completely, and I just don't believe that's possible. I think people are complicated, and which is really the kind of thing an 8-wing 9 would say, probably.
That's exactly what they would say, actually.
Yeah. But I think people are complicated, and I think in spiritual gift inventories, you see that. Sometimes you'll say, well, I don't have a gift of teaching. You take the little test, and therefore I never have to teach ever again, and yet we're all called to teach in the Great Commission. Or you might say, well, I don't have a gift of serving, so I never have to serve again, and yet Jesus says the greatest will be the servant. And so I think just because you might have a natural bent for something doesn't give you the freedom not to do the other things that are out there. And sometimes as a Christian, we're called to go serve in areas that really have nothing to do at all with our gifts. They're much more about the need. And then too, as you get older, you might find yourself changing and switching a little bit as new experiences, and both spiritual and otherwise, come into your life. But with that proviso out of the way, what we were going to do today is just talk about different aspects of the spiritual gifts Paul lists here, and encourage you maybe to think about which gift you are, and then to run in that gift as much as you can. I think for the most part, and this is not just a Christian thing, but in life, I think you're best off to run in your strengths. I think sometimes we spend so much time working on our weaknesses, which is healthy. It's a good thing too. But we spend so much time working on our weaknesses that we don't have time to run into things that maybe is how God designed us to run. So just for memory's sake, in Romans chapter 12, Paul says we have different gifts, verse 6, according to the grace given to each of us. And he says if your gift is prophesying, and we talked about how prophesying was kind of a discernment gift, the ability to see God's will clearly and to describe it and discuss it. If your gift's prophesying, then do it in accordance with your faith. If your gift is serving, then serve. If it's teaching, then teach. Encouraging, then give encouragement. If your gift is giving, then give generously. If your gift is leadership, then do it diligently. And if your gift is showing mercy, then do it cheerfully. And so I want 7 gifts: prophecy and service, teaching, encouragement, giving, leadership, and mercy or compassion, and just maybe talk about what those are. And then maybe just for fun, I'll test Gabe and see what he is today.
Okay. On what you said earlier, did you mention the working genius test?
There is a working genius test.
So the last thing you said was interesting, because that's part of that test is actually trying to get people to see if you're not good at something. Most of us want to improve in those areas, which is fine. But when it comes to, I don't know, like leadership or, a job or something, what this test actually says is, why don't you just stick to what you're good at and enable other people who are good at those areas you're bad at to do those things. And I thought that was interesting, because you were going that way.
No.
With finding what we're good at and what we're not. And I think that's true. Even as a church, we're trying to, you're not all into tech and stuff.
Right.
It didn't mean that during COVID you had to.
Right.
It meant you just let someone else do tech or
Right.
whatever.
And I think it works best when that goes on. I think that's the best way to go. I really think that works. In fact, I kind of have this thought, and it's a unique thought, and this is Jeff, not the Bible. It's just, you'll not find a verse that necessarily tells you what I'm getting ready to say. So there's lots of room to disagree. And even if all of you disagree, that's okay. It probably means I'm wrong, for whatever that's worth. But I've always had this thought that I think even in heaven, we're going to have gifts. I think some people think that when you get to heaven, all of a sudden you'll be good at everything. And I do think in heaven you'll have the ability and time to work on everything. But I kind of wonder if there's just you're made a certain way, that God designed you a certain way, and that the only one who has all the gifts is God, and we're not God, and we're never going to be God. And I think there's a beauty in us all coming together, and I do my part and you do your part, and as we all do our part together, we become something bigger than ourselves. And it's a beauty that I'm not sure is just for this world. I think it really is God's design. And that gets kind of complicated and thick, and I know you could take it too far. And there may be somebody watching who's not a musician who always hoped in heaven they could learn to play the guitar, and you can. I'm sure you can if there's guitars in heaven. And I think there
I think that's more. It's more for the purpose of uniting God's people, like for the purpose of reaching the world. Not everyone has to be a preacher.
Right.
Not everyone has to be a worship leader. Not everyone has to be good at tech. But just the Bible says we're a body, and you may cover that
right.
We are a body. We're different parts of the body. Some are the hands and the arms and the legs and the feet. We all have a purpose, part of the body. We all have a special function, but we don't all have to be one thing.
Right. Well, and I think you can really hurt yourself emotionally and mentally trying to be something you're not. And it can be a form of pride in a weird, odd way. Mm-hmm. Be who you are. So, with that in mind, the first gift that Paul lists is the gift of prophecy, and how I understand it, there is more of a gift of discernment or perception. You see God's will very clearly, and you want to run in that. Some clues about who a perceiver could be and whether or not that's your gift or someone with discernment. You see everything as black and white. I mean, there's very little gray in your worldview. Now, as you get older, there may be some gray edges that creep in. There have been for me, and discernment or perception, that's probably my number one gift. But by and large, you're black and white. The downside is you can tend to be kind of judgmental and blunt sometimes, and you can even struggle a little bit with your self-image, because that same standard you're holding everybody else to, you hold yourself to it too, and you see all the different ways that you fail. People who have discernment sometimes struggle making deep friendships. It can be kind of a hard thing for them to do it because, again, that judgmental thing. They view the Bible as the basis for truth. They have very strong convictions and opinions. They're outspoken and frank and persuasive, and sometimes a little pushy. They want to see their own blind spots. They want to help other people see those too. They're called to pray, and they feel a burden for it. They feel the need to verbalize what they see in the world and what they see in others. If any of those things sounds like, well, that sounds like me a little bit, that sounds like something I am, then maybe that's your gift. And I think if that is something that you are, one of those kinds of things, well, great. We need people to do that. We need people to step up and to lead in that way and to encourage others in that way. You don't have to be a preacher to use that gift. I mean, just in our church, I mean, anything that deals with disciple making, a person who has a gift for discernment can be a lot of help as you try to help somebody come along and figure things out. And we need those kinds of mentors in 1,000 different areas. So that's perception.
Yeah. And how many are there total?
7.
7, okay.
You're not getting bored?
No.
Okay, good.
I'm watching the time.
Number 2, service. A person who's got a gift of service, they easily recognize practical needs, and they're quick to meet them. They're critical of people who don't see those same obvious needs. I mean, I can't believe you're not seeing that. How could you walk past that? Often they're a detailed person who has a pretty good memory about things. They want to work with their hands. They have a hard time saying no to other people. They're more interested in meeting the needs of other people than their own needs or their own family's needs. They want to work on immediate goals. Long-range stuff kind of is boring to them. They want to focus on what's going on right now. One weakness of the servant is they need to feel appreciated, and it can really hurt them if no one notices and no one appreciates what they're doing. They don't want to lead others. They don't want to lead projects. They just want to support the leaders. They have a high energy level, and they want to use that. If that's you, then maybe service is a gift that you have. And we need servers. Again, in 1,000 different ways. Service is some of those gifts that people might not think of as church gifts, but we need them. Maybe your service gift is I like to build things or construct things or fix cars or I'm really good with with tech even. I'm good with those kind of things. I like doing it. And if you've got a gift for that, then we need those people too.
I think the problem, if there are times we feel like there's not a lot of people serving, like children's ministry or in tech area, we're always needing people to step up. But I wonder how many times it's not because as a church even we don't offer enough opportunities for such people to serve, because based on those qualities, no servant is going to show up and say, hey, I'm your guy, put me anywhere, I can do anything. Right. That's not typically the call. But if you ask, if you make a request, and unfortunately they have a hard time saying no, right, they'll probably, you know, you may be plugged in, but you're waiting for someone to ask you, which is fair. But in case they don't, I actually want to encourage everyone who, you know, may have this gift of service to step up. It may be outside of your comfort zone, but to step up and to say, I'm not the best with kids. Well, we probably don't want that in children's ministry. We want good people.
Well, but we need people. Well, that's not true. There's people who help in children's ministry, but they don't necessarily help on Sundays. They come in during the week and they set things up and they make things happen. Right. There's always a need. Gabe's right. We'll talk about leaders here in a little bit. It's servers and leaders that will jump in immediately in a crisis. A couple of years ago, we had a water problem downstairs. It flooded our whole basement there as some of the gutters went up under the building and got into a French drain under the building that we'd kind of forgotten was even there, and it flooded the whole kids' wing. Quickly, servers and leaders jumped in immediately. The servers were grabbing mops, and the leaders were giving direction, hey, move over here, get this thing done. Into the chaos, a server will jump in. But into the everyday kind of thing where it's not necessarily failing, but it's a solid C+. Sometimes the server will just sit there and not know if they should jump in or not. And it's good to push yourself there. Mm-hmm. The teachers are the third gift. They present truth in a logical way. They like to study and research, although they can get distracted. The teacher is the kind of guy who can get on a Wikipedia site and stay there for 2 hours as they keep looking up new things and trying to see what's going on. They enjoy word studies, and they usually have a large vocabulary. Actually, usually have a pretty good intellect all the way around. And sometimes that can lead to pride. They got to be careful about that. A teacher gets upset when scripture is used out of context. They want to check the credentials of the person teaching, and they want to check what they taught. They'll review it and go back over it. They believe that the truth has an intrinsic power to produce change, and they sometimes don't worry about as much about application as they do about just getting the word out there and making sure kids understand it, making sure people understand it. I think the teacher might be drawn to a teaching on Revelation, or let's get a really deep study about Jesus' words in the Gospels on these things. You know, what did Jesus mean when he said, I am something, you know, and then really dig into that, because just thinking about God's word has a power all by itself to change. This would also be one of my gifts. Perception normally is my top gift. and teaching's number 2. And I have to be careful to make sure I bring application to it. I might not think about that normally. I think about, well, here's the truth, do something with it. And you got to think about the application too. So teaching. Number 4, encouraging. Barnabas was an encourager in the Bible. They even called him, Barnabas means son of encouragement. They named him, changed his name because of that. An encourager he's just the opposite of the teacher. They enjoy application more than research. They want to see that it has a point, and it has a point quickly. Their focus is on people, and their whole agenda is to help people succeed. They want a visible response. And so if they're counseling or helping somebody out and they're not seeing a lot of change with that person, it's very easy for them to want to move on to the next person. I want to go someplace where it's working. I don't want to stay here if they're not helping me. They accept people pretty quickly without judging them, and they view the stuff that they're going through as just opportunities. If they're going through some hard things, even hard things that they caused, just opportunity for growth. And it's very easy for them to not spin it exactly, but to see that God can work even in the bad stuff to bring about good results. They want to clear up problems with other people quickly, whether it's a forgiveness issue or just some breakdown in communication. Generally have a positive attitude. They can tend to interrupt people and run over people sometimes with their eagerness to help or their eagerness to share. But man, we can't make it without the encouragers. They're the ones who keep us going. And I can think of several people in our church who are that to me and who are that to other people. They're the people the encouragers are the ones you look for when you're starting to kind of struggle. You don't look for discernment people like me. You don't look for teachers. You look for encouragers. Who's going to help me figure out how to dig out of this? Who's going to be there for me no matter what? And the church really desperately needs it. It's kind of the heartbeat for a church. Givers. Givers love to give freely of their money and possessions and time and energy and their love. They love to give without people knowing about it. They want to feel like they're a part of the ministry. They don't just want to be given. They want to feel like they're part of it, and they want to feel like the Holy Spirit is kind of doing it, pushing them to do it. A person who's got a gift for giving, they'll handle their finances with wisdom and frugality. They'll hunt for bargains. And they've got a strong conviction about doing the best you can with money. Usually givers are street smart. I mean, they're not gullible. They're the kind of people who are very successful in their own endeavors, may not be rich. I don't think that's necessarily a requirement for giving. But I mean, for the most part, what they put their minds to, it works because they are street smart. Sometimes they can want to control how those contributions are used. Sometimes that can get out of hand. And sometimes they can want to use their financial giving. Hey, because I gave this and this and this, I don't really have to do these other things. And that can be a weakness for all the gifts, by the way. Just because I taught, I don't really have to do, or because I encourage, I don't really have to do. And that can be a problem for the giver too. But the giver is very industrious, have strong convictions, and they want to give. It's what it sounds like.
So what would you compare this to people giving financially and giving like time and service?
Well, I think both are needed. I mean, one of the big givers in the Bible was a guy named Zacchaeus. When Jesus got through to him, the first thing he did is said, I'm going to pay back anybody that I've ripped off. And he'd ripped off a lot of people. He had made a lot of enemies. I'm going to pay them all back. If it takes the rest of my life, I'm going to pay them all back. I mean, he really had a kind of a strong conviction about it. And I would imagine for Zacchaeus, that wouldn't have been just about money. I'm sure it was money. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure part of it was saying you're sorry. Part of it was making amends, trying to clear up not just the financial debts that you had with people, but clear up all the debts you had with people. I think it's all those things. I think some people might have a gift of giving, but especially a younger person who's just getting started, they've got a heartbeat for it. Man, they see the need and they want to take care of it and they want to do what they can. They don't have very much money. I mean, they're just getting started in life and they don't have a lot to give. Or you can go through a pretty hard time in your life. Maybe you're naturally wired to be generous. That's very easy for you to do, but you've went through a real health problem, or you went through a crisis of some sort, and your funds aren't. There's lots of ways to give. There's lots of ways to give, and some of the more powerful ways to give aren't financial. They're time and energy based, showing affection. We have, as a culture, as Americans, and at every church I've served, sometimes giving time is the most precious thing. If I stand up at Mount Pleasant and say we've got a real need right now in the whatever ministry, and it's just really desperate. I mean, if we don't get something done pretty quick, we're going to see some real pain, and it's going to be exhausting and hard and challenging. And so I need everybody in the church who can to either think about ponying up $20 or give me an hour of your week this week so we can work on this, whatever this is. Most people reach for their billfolds, and they don't think about it. It's if $20 an hour is $20, or and it has to be a pretty big dollar number before that hour starts looking attractive to a lot of people.
Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I mean, we're a rich culture. I mean, we are. I know there's a lot of discussions about inequities and different things like that, but I had some patches on my clothes when I went to school. I mean, the poorest kid in school's not wearing patches anymore. I mean, as a culture, we're just better off than we used to be. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, you know. But most people don't think that much of giving $5 or $10. They don't. It doesn't hurt their bottom line. Not really at the end of the week. Most of the people who go to the church, if they give $10, they're still going to eat all their meals this week. They're still going to do that. But that hour, they've got plans for that hour. You know, even if the plans are just watching television, they've got plans for that hour, and I think that's it.
That is one area I will say that earlier I made the comment about us not necessarily, like, we don't have to be good in all areas, you know, but there are some areas that are just for the benefit of others and for our personal growth that we should grow in. Like, if you struggle letting go of any of your time to serve or to help your neighbor, and you use that time for TV, for your own personal things only, that's when I would say that there's maybe a room to evaluate where you stand. Because we're called to love our neighbor, we're called to serve, and you may be able to give a lot of money, but I mean, I know God also expects us to act, to serve, to do things for people.
Right.
I'll leave it at that.
Well, no,
we can get deep into it.
No, I'm. One thing we talked about with the server earlier is they have a hard time saying no. I do think, and Jesus talks about give to anyone who asks you. I mean, that's the verse, and I'm sure in context I could maybe find a way to soften that just a little bit, but that's the verse. Give to anyone who asks you. And so I think our default setting in our hard drives ought to be yes. If someone asks you for help, if someone asks you for time, if someone asks you for a minute, our default ought to be yes. We're a little late on this today, on our study today. We planned to start at 11:30, and it's all my fault. But people came by, and it was all good stuff. Everybody who came by, it was good. I was glad they all did. And my sin nature, every time somebody came in, was like, I can't talk to you right now. You know, you need to leave. I have this plan, but you can't do that. You know what I'm saying? You can't. And so because of that, we're starting 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late, and I know that's aggravating for people who were hoping it would be at a certain time or whatever else. But in the big scheme of things, what's more important, that I be there for other people who might need something, or that I be prompt to whatever appointment? And it's hard. And it's not like there's always one answer that's the right answer on that. Sometimes you better be prompt, you know. I've known guys who have gotten in trouble at work because they always had time to stop and talk to somebody. They're not paying you for that. They're paying you to work. And so you need to use wisdom here, right? But I think our default setting ought to be yes. If someone asks you, I think our default setting should be yes. And
Whitney said that she's glad we didn't start at 11:30 because she wouldn't have been able to make it at 11:30.
See, there you go.
So maybe there's a reason for all this.
Right. We'll choose to believe that. The administrator or the leader is usually, that's the sixth gift, usually a clear communicator. They believe in a line of authority. They usually won't take authority or take charge unless the person who is in charge says it's okay. But they will jump into a leadership vacuum. If they walk in and it's just chaos, they'll jump in and start saying, okay, let's do this, let's do that, let's figure it out. Generally, they're visionary. They like long-range planning. It's like a catnip to them. It's easy for them to think about goals and charts and targets and plot lines. They enjoy delegating and supervising other people. They'll endure criticism. A little criticism doesn't really rock their boat too hard. And the danger is sometimes they can get kind of calloused to it, and they can get real insensitive because of it. So they got to watch that if they're a leader, but they can take some criticism. They have great zeal and enthusiasm for what they're involved in. They're willing to let other people get the credit as long as the job gets done. The job, the task at hand is the main thing. How do we get this done, whatever this is? They know when to keep the old methods and the old traditions, and they know when to use new ones. And again, willing to take some heat if they have to get it. And a leader is always looking for a new challenge. They're hungry for it. They like to organize. They like to bring order out of the chaos. If you've got a natural gift for leadership, we need you. And there's 1,000 different ways to use that gift in a church, because there's 1,000 different chaoses that spring up. Rick Warren at Saddleback used to talk about, if you don't like organized religion, we're for you. We're disorganized religion. And I feel like that at Mount Pleasant too often. So and the church always needs leadership. Always needs people to come in and speak to that. So that's leaders. Mm-hmm. The last gift is mercy or compassion. They have a tremendous capacity for love. They always look for the good in people. They are attracted to people hurting or in distress, and they have a special radar if that hurt is kind of a mental hurt or an emotional hurt, an emotional stress. They can sense it, and it's very easy for them to take action to try to meet those needs. They're motivated to build relationships with other people. They easily detect insincerity and wrong motives. They love to do thoughtful things for each other. They think about it quickly. It's not hard for them to think about it. They're trusting and they're trustworthy, but they can be easily hurt if their trust is broken. It really surprises. A person who's got a gift for mercy or compassion is completely blown away when somebody breaks their trust. They just don't think about that would ever happen because they're not wired that way. They avoid conflicts and confrontations. They're ruled by their heart and not their head, and they can be a crusader for somebody who they feel like is being trampled or forgotten or oppressed or hurt. They have a hard time letting that go. Sometimes, in fact, I've known people who have a gift for mercy or compassion. They hang on to it longer than the person who was hurt. Like one story in my head where somebody who had that gift, a couple in the church was getting divorced, and my friend who had a gift for mercy really kind of was helping one of them try to get through it, because it really was devastating, a big surprise. There was an affair, and the other person had left, and it was awful. And so my friend jumped in to help her friend just get through it, manage getting the kids together, be there for the long nights, just talking about it. And it looked like the divorce was going to happen. And after about a month, they started talking to each other again, the couple, and they were going to try to work it out. And my friend had such a hard time forgiving the dude. How can you take him back after all he's done? And some of that's normal, right? Some of that's natural. You would do that too, no matter what your gift is. But even after they had gotten back together, my friend had a hard time letting that go. She carried the hurt so close to her own heart, she couldn't. I don't care if you've forgiven him, I can't forgive him. And it's like, it had nothing to do with you. But it becomes like it does. It's such a personal deal, and their heart gets so tied up into it. You can take another person's offense and make it your own. And there's good and bad to that. Now, I will say that in a church, in my experience, most people, it's not evenly divided, the 7 gifts, like 1/7 go to each category. Normally, there's more people who have this gift than any other, and I think it's because God inflames that in us. And hopefully, in a church, you see more and more and more people start to develop that gift, because that really is what makes it all work, that we love each other. And we're going to love each other through the worst parts. We're a family here. Now, I'll confess to you, and I hate to do this because, again, the Enneagram lovers will say, oh, yeah, I see that. And I hate that, but it's just a weakness I'm trying to work through. But this was always my lowest gift. Whenever we would take the test, I found that I had no mercy or no compassion. It was something when I first became a Christian was always, well, I know, yeah, it's hard to see, but way down at the very bottom. And I've had to try to cultivate that. Now, what I said at the very beginning is still true. Run in the paths of your strengths. But just because one thing's not your strength, if it's amazingly low, staggeringly low, the kind of low score that would make other people wonder if really ministry was your right career choice, then you have to work on it a little bit. And I have worked on it through the years quite a bit, and I'm trying to get better all the time. But like the easy trusting thing, that's not me at all. Taking on the other person's offense and making it your own, I very rarely do that. And so I'm growing. But if this is your gift, I mean, Jesus had this. Well, Jesus had all these. But this is the part of the body of Christ that really is it's the most important, which is kind of painful for me, like I said, that it's not something that I naturally excel in. But I really do think it's the most important thing. It's this gift that distinguishes us from every other movement in the world.
Now, do you think you have compassion, you just don't know how to show it well, or do you think you're just less compassionate?
Well, I don't think I'm a cyborg or anything like that, but no, I don't think I'm naturally wired that way. I sometimes at camp, I just work church camp, so it's fresh in my mind. And we have a couple of the sponsors who are really, really strong with this gift. Man, their heart just really beats for them. And one of the kids early in the week at high school week was a little bit homesick, you know, and just missing their mom, and one of the counselors again who just has such a heart for kids, you know, had her arm around her and, hey, we love you, and you know, we just want you to know we love you, and Jeff, what do you think? Why should she stay? And I think I said something like, well, you know, it's not a jail term. If you want if you want to go home, you can. And I think I said something like that, like Jesus would have said in that same situation.
Probably.
And the person who had the gift of mercy looked at me like they were horrified, like, I can't believe that came out of your mouth. And when I saw their reaction, then I softened it, like, oh, I mean, I don't mean like we want you to leave, and I didn't want them to leave. It's just I'm just not wired that way, and I'm working on it. We're all trying to grow. Just pray for me. You can.
Whitney made the comment that it's true that some of us can have a mix of a few and have multiple gifts. You can be good at compassion and serving, or be a leader and, you know, maybe compassion, or, you know, whatever. And I think a lot of people too. I think the more you walk with God, the more you're full of the Spirit and you do life with God, the more of these things you'll get better at. But it's maybe the person that may be resisting the Spirit a little bit, may just stick to one area, or not really even really fully develop an area when we do things on our own. I mean, 5 hours watching TV a day will do something to you, and 5 hours praying every day will do something to you. So it depends how you live your life that determines what type of gifts you develop, what talents you develop.
Always true. I used to teach guitar lessons quite a bit, and I would tell the students, you know, just a few minutes every day holding your guitar and playing just something. It's amazing how quickly you get good. But it's when you let the guitar sit in the case for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time and don't touch it, and then wonder why your fingers hurt when you grab it. Mm-hmm. It's just a little bit, as you run in your gifts and what you think your gifts are, the best way to find out what your gifts are, just get started.
Right.
And if you think maybe one of these is your gifts, then I want to encourage you just to get started and see how God might use you in that, and we just never know.
One last question we have is, how come we can possess many of these gifts but yet are unable to receive a compliment? And I was thinking about that a little bit when I read it. If it's the question how I understand it, like how come I just literally can't receive a compliment, I'm assuming it's on a good note. I think it could be humility, that you don't know how to take a compliment because you don't want to be prideful or arrogant or anything. I had someone tell me once, they gave me a compliment at something I did, and I didn't know what to say. Like, literally, they said the compliment. I'm like, and he's like, if someone gives you a compliment, you can just take it and run. You don't have to say anything. You can just, you know, say thank you, and then that's it. I think, me personally, I border on the line of receiving a compliment and liking it too much, maybe, or getting prideful. We all have that danger.
Right.
For me, it's that, if that's how I understand the comment, if it's receiving a compliment like you don't believe it,
Right.
that's something else.
It's a good question. I mean, usually just thank you is the best way. If you don't, usually when you try to run away from it, it just makes it worse. I really appreciate how you came and helped me fix my car up. I couldn't have done it without you. Oh, no, I didn't do anything. Oh, no, but you did. And I mean, there's no way that they can respond without going deeper and deeper into it. Usually just, hey, thank you. That's usually enough to get it on. And this may not be your intent at all, whoever asked the question, but just as food for thought, if the question is, how come no one ever notices? I think this is my gift, but no one ever seems to notice that it's my gift. My encouragement to you is a couple things. First of all, if you're getting something pretty powerful out of it, if it's blessing your heart, then don't get too hung up on what people say, positively or negatively. If it's blessing you, and when you do it, you feel closer to God, you feel like you're in God's hand, you feel like you're doing good for the kingdom, man, just keep going. Because sometimes people aren't going to appreciate it. Sometimes I do the very best job I think I can, and nobody digs it at all, and that's okay. I mean, that's okay. That's sadly that's life, and that's how that goes. I mean, and it can be on stupid things. I washed the dishes the other night, and nobody noticed, and I'm dying because the whole sink was full, and then it's empty, and no one notices, and that's just my sin nature creeping out, and don't get too hung up on that. On the other hand, if you're not sure if it's your gift, you wonder if it might be, but you're not sure, and you don't really get that much out of it, and everybody's telling you, I don't know, then sometimes they're right. And so pray a lot. I mean, there's no hard, fast rule on this thing. If it's blessing you and you're blessing others, run hard and don't get too hung up on other people. But these gifts, they're not jail sentences. If you're stuck teaching and you don't have any gift for teaching and everybody's telling you the teaching is a little rough when you do it, then sometimes it's okay to switch. Nothing wrong with that. I don't know how the question was intended, but just I don't even read the question. I'm getting Gabe's interpretation of the question.
I got hearts, so I'm assuming that was a good answer.
Awesome. Yeah. We're going to have to go. We went too long, and that's my fault too. But we really do appreciate your interest in this, and I hope this is a thing you'll meditate on and consider what maybe your gift in the church might be.
So thank you for joining us. We do these every week. We're actually going to change these to Tuesdays again. We just love switching things up on you to keep you on your toes. Yeah. But we're going to switch it to Tuesdays starting next week. But we hope you get a lot out of this. Thank you for all of you watching, commenting, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.